What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about my first year residence experience living in Place Vanier, living in a first year residence complex, not having to commute, making friends and all that jazz. Before I say too much, let's jump into today's video and I will share with you why I decided to live in residence and what I thought about it. Let's go. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, the tea, if you will, there isn't really any tea, but that was fun to say. Before we kind of jump into it all, I just wanted to kind of say that the main reason that I decided to live in residence in my first year was because I did not want to have to worry about commuting. For people that have done the commute, kudos to you. I personally did not want to have to deal with either busing or driving in. The other reason that I decided to live in residence in first year was because I wanted to be able to spend a little bit of time and focus more on reaching out and meeting new people and not having to worry about giving up that time because I was spending 2 hours in a car or 3 hours on the bus. It's different for everybody, but for me those were just two really big priorities, and those priorities were best supported by me living in residence. I lived in Place Vanier in my first year, in Korea House specifically. I was really lucky because Korea House is one of the newer buildings in Vanier, but it's also strictly single rooms and it's co-ed. So I had a mixed gender floor, which was great. It was really fun. I also had a single room, which meant I had privacy. My experience would have been significantly different if I had a roommate. I'm not the type of person to like to share a space that closely with somebody. I'm a pretty social person, but I definitely like my downtime, and considering all the things that I was going through during my first year, I definitely needed my own space. Move-in day was an absolute blast, and I did jumpstart, so I got to move in a little bit early. But within that week, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of new people, both in my own residence complex and in other ones. So already within the first week, I was starting to meet new people. I was out and about, I was social, I was doing my thing, and it was a lot of fun. And then school started. Not to say that this drastically changed, but more people moved in. I met more people, definitely met some people that I was kind of like, oh yes, you're the wild child I've been warned about. Then I've met other people where I'm like, oh my god, you are the absolutely most sweetest, adorable little person. There were so many of them on my floor, which was awesome. I think I got really lucky with my floor mates because there weren't a lot of wild nights, and if we wanted to have one, we went out of our way to make one happen. But it wasn't like there was a party every single night, and it wasn't like people were screaming and running down the halls, and quite honestly, I expected it to just be absolute chaos, but my floor mates were really chill, really friendly. We loved having little adventures, whether that was in res or outside of res. We all got along, and that definitely made it a really easy dynamic. For the most part, like if people didn't want to be a part of things, they just kept to themselves. When it came to studying and actually being there for school, it was again like a really supportive environment. I think a huge part of my residence experience and what made it so great was the fact that these people could be there both for me just as a friend, but also as a fellow student and somebody that I could rant to about all the things that drove me absolutely crazy. Having people who could be so dynamic with me and just embrace everything that I'm feeling, but also understand it because they're experiencing it too. I know if I had been living at home, one, I wouldn't have met all of those people, but I would have felt significantly more isolated in what I was feeling because I wouldn't be able to experience it firsthand with people who were also feeling the same things as me. And I think that was something that was really good for me in the beginning because I had a very rough first term. You will hear much more about that later. But having people that I could go to and talk to about these things that we were both feeling was really helpful. The people in residence were just amazing, and the girls that I met were so supportive and so kind. Very quickly you figure out who you want to spend more time with and who you're like, yeah, I don't need to be around you. But that's just natural. That's just the way things go. You're not going to be friends with everybody, and just because you live on the same floor doesn't mean you need to be friends with everybody. And of course it's important to be friendly with them and to be kind and respectful because you are living with them. I never had to deal with any of that within my residence building, which was great. Good on the social front. There were so many opportunities to go out, whether it was to like a movie night or a karaoke event or just like a game of ultimate frisbee. There were so many opportunities there to go and meet more people, but also just get to experience residence at its finest, really. The one thing that I absolutely love loved about Vanier was the fact that it was a very social residence complex. Just the way that it's kind of designed, it really encourages people to kind of congregate and just chill in the field and be in the moment, I guess. And it sounds all so silly, but one thing that just made my heart like jump every time I saw it was seeing people like playing any given sport or just sitting and studying in the field on a sunny day. I was like, oh my God. For me, it felt very surreal because those are the types of things that I would imagine I would see in a movie, and here it was happening right in front of me. PVRA, which is the Place Vanier Residents Association, did a really good job of making sure that there were tons of events hosted for us. There was always something, and it was just so much fun because each time it would be a completely different group of people, and there was so much opportunity to get involved and be a part of what was happening. That was something that I really missed out on a little bit too. As much as there was some stuff that I went to, there was nowhere near as much that I went to that I would have liked to. There were tons of events, I just never took advantage of the fact that they were being offered. Not to say that I regret it, but that was definitely something I wish that I had done a little bit more of, because very quickly I got kind of nestled into my routine and I kind of lost sight of the fact that other things happen outside of school. So, you know, there'd be a lot of days where I'd be cooped up in my room just studying when I could have been playing a game of Ultimate Frisbee or could have been singing horribly with my friends up on a stage in front of a whole bunch of strangers. Overall though, the social life within Vanier is pretty freaking awesome, and it's there if you want it. A lot of this really just comes down to whether or not you're taking the initiative to go out and meet people and be a part of all of these things that are happening. The opportunity is there, you just have to take it. Living in residence definitely encouraged me to be more social and be more outgoing and step outside of my pretty normal routine. I'm going to be honest, there were definitely a few times where I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. As a domestic student that only lives about an hour and a half away from UBC, I'm very thankful for the fact that I had the ability to go home, because at times, like specifically during the winter, there are days where it is so disgusting on campus. The weather here is not always nice. For me, I get really affected by the weather, like really affected. On the weekends where it was absolutely disgusting, going home was really good for me, because when it's gross out like that, you're not going out with your friends and you're not chilling out in the sun, you're cooped up in your room studying. I did not like being alone. I found I constantly needed to be around people, and I think in part that just came down to the fact that so much had changed. I had moved out of my house with my family. I was completely on my own, and of course, like, I had my friends, but they weren't right there. And at the same time, always being in your room can be very isolating, and when you want to be with other people but you can't necessarily, it can make it really hard to get out of your room. At times, being on my own in a room definitely made it a little bit harder. You know, you kind of lose some motivation and you're like, oh, okay. Living in residence can feel very isolating and lonely, but the best thing that you can do is reach out to your support network, whether that's your parents or your friends, or just get out of your room. Getting yourself out of your room is definitely a really big help when it comes to keeping your room associated with happy times and happy things. That is definitely something that I really tried to do. Trying to make my dorm feel like it was a very homey place was really important to me, and making sure that I had a very positive residence experience and making sure that I had a place that I felt like I could go to that was my own, that was my home, was really important as well. Overall, I found living on my own totally fine. I kind of liked it. It's that first taste of independence, but very quickly the novelty of living on my own kind of wore off. In part, this could be due to the fact that I was living in like a hallway and I literally just had a bedroom. I didn't have a kitchen. I didn't have my own bathroom. Like, I didn't have my own house. Not that I would have my own house if I were not living in residence. I don't have that kind of money. There's a very big difference between living in one room versus living in a house. I didn't mind living on my own, but I only had one space that I could go. And for me, that was really hard. I didn't like only having my room to go to. Quite frankly, I think at this point I would be better to live with like a roommate, just because I need that interaction and I need people around me. If I were living in a house, at least I would have the option to either be in the presence of people, or I could be in my room alone and that could be my own space, but I would still have their company because they would still be there. Overall, I would say like living in residence was totally fine, aside from the fact that at times I was definitely like, okay, I need to get out of here. We're just gonna jump back to the people that lived on my floor really quick. And do not get me wrong, I really liked all of them. for the most part. Okay, just a little bit of context here. I'm not a party animal. I know absolutely nothing about this party scene at UBC. I'm scared of illicit things. I'm pretty goody two shoes. I follow the rules. I go to bed early. I'm a very like routine, linear person, and the person who lived really close to me was not. They were awake at the most random hours. They were always very loud, and it's not that they were intentionally being loud. Their voice just carried. You could be at the other end of the building and still hear this person if they were like whispering, and I don't get it. For me, that was a really big adjustment because I went from living in a household where people were pretty respectful of volume and, you know, being in each other's space to living across from somebody who didn't know what that boundary was. That was just something that I had to learn how to deal with. That was just something I had to learn how to manage. But it does get to a point where, you know, you're lying in bed at 1:30 a.m. and you're like, I have a midterm at 8 in the morning, like I need to get some sleep. There were definitely a couple nights where I kind of went over and just knocked on the person's door and was like, hey, do you mind? I'm sorry, I've got a midterm. Most people are very understanding of that, and this person was, which was great, so I didn't have to get an RA involved, but there were definitely some times where this person was just off their rocker. They were having a great time. I'm glad they were, but you know, you gotta be mindful of the others around you. And I think that's definitely a really big thing in residence and something that a lot of people at first kind of forget about because like I said before, it's all so new and it's all so exciting and you're like, oh my God, I'm living on my own. And so you kind of go a little crazy, and not everybody does, but some people do. In having a lot of fun, they kind of lose sight of the fact that there are other people around them who might not be used to that type of stuff. Again, like for the most part, there were really no issues with that, but there were definitely a couple nights where I was like, oh my God. But that's just it. And that's all a part of the experience, you know, to each their own. But all those little stories and the things that you can say happened, that's what shapes your first year residence experience. Overall, I would say that I had a really amazing residence experience. I was lucky enough to be in a nicer building. I was in Place Vanier. I was close to all my classes. I was close to my friends. I met so many new people. I got to be a part of so many different things. But of course, with every experience, there are the ups and downs. And there were some times where I did not want to be there. And there were some times where I wanted to just like, you know, go a little crazy and be like, hey, shut up, please, thank you. Kind of reflecting back, I'm kind of sitting here going, okay, given that I was right there on campus, I lived on campus for 8 months, there was a lot more that I could have gone and done. Living in residence gives you the gift of time if you would have otherwise been commuting. Considering I had that extra time, of course it's important to be studying, but now I'm sitting here kind of going, okay, I could have been having a lot more fun. I could have been going and doing a lot more things. And I didn't. In part, that is truly just a little bit of my nature. I'm the type of person that likes to be focused on one thing. When I'm focused on school, I'm focused on school, and when I'm in that zone, I'm in that zone. One thing that I didn't really like about residence was the fact that I had no separation between my home life and my school life. I was never able to completely relax because I was constantly surrounded by my classrooms and I was constantly surrounded by my fellow classmates. Like, I was always in school mode, which was exhausting. It was hard. You know, at times, like, you just need a break. And I never really felt like I could have that break always being in residence. And that's in part why I've decided to start like looking for a place off campus for next year, because I don't want to have to run into that same problem. I want to feel like my home is my home. I don't want to feel like home is school and that's what happens there. Like, that's just kind of personally where I stand. I know I've kind of kept this pretty surface level, but that kind of does it in terms of what I thought of first year residence. I think I had a pretty good time. There's not anything I regret not doing or doing. It's like I came out of it pretty good, I think. And I mean, it does suck a little bit because it was cut short. I ended up moving out about a month earlier than what I was supposed to, just because of how this COVID-19 situation evolved. For me, it made most sense to come home because it was safer for me to be at home than in residence. And it kind of sucks because my experience, though it was really good all year, didn't start to get super awesome until like the beginning of March, I would say. When the weather started getting better, everybody was outside more, and my friends and I kind of got into this routine of going to class and doing our thing, and then we would go and play basketball for a few hours, and then we get some food, and then we do a bit more studying, and that was kind of our thing. Like, it was such an awesome group of people, and it sucks that I didn't get to meet them sooner. I didn't meet most of them until term 2, which, I mean, you know, not that bad, but that's just January. So like, that's pretty recent still. For me, it really sucked because all of a sudden these absolutely amazing people had come into my life and we had this really cool thing going and we were enjoying ourselves and we loved each other's company. And then it was kind of taken away. Stupid virus. All of us first year students didn't really get our final hurrah, yeah, we did it. We didn't get our last day of classes party, and we didn't get to, you know, bask in the glory of first year and all that it is, and we didn't really get to celebrate the fact that we made it out alive. At the end of the day, it is not the biggest problem we are facing right now, so it's not within my control. It's not anything I could have changed, but what I'm happy with is the fact that I made the most of my experience in the ways that I felt I could. That pretty much does it. I'm sorry this was a longer video, but there was just a lot of different things that I wanted to talk about, and hopefully I didn't bore you to death. You know, us humans have the attention span of a goldfish, so if you made it this far, I'm like thoroughly impressed. If you have questions about things that I didn't talk about, feel free to ask. As I said, that's pretty much all I got for you guys today, so again, thank you so much for watching. I've got one on the way. I'll be talking about my first year experience, which was a whole other level of crazy. That's not specific to living in residence. That's just like specific to like me and school. Not something I want to dive into. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed and I will see you next time. I hope. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Bye.